The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters radio show was originally broadcast on August 24th, 2021.
Aloha and welcome, Maui, to the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters radio show, sponsored by Mokulele Airlines. I'm your host, Pamela Tumpot, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and today we're going to talk about reopening of schools, critical issues in education, and legislative priorities for the upcoming session with Representative Justin Woodson. We're going to look at top business needs and the Small Business Administration, hear from updates from the SBA District Director, and discuss current projects and housing issues with the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity, Maui. So first, I'd like to kick us off with welcoming Representative Justin Woodson. He has served in the Hawaii State Legislature since 2013. He chairs the House Committee on Education and advocates for world-class education in each classroom in Maui, the state of Hawaii, and the nation. Aloha and good morning, Justin. How are you this morning?
Hi, Pamela. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on this morning. So it has been a really busy time, and, this last legislative session was really busy, and, of course, with COVID, things were so different. But you've really been leading and championing many legislative efforts to focus on world-class education in each classroom that started very early from pre-kindergarten, and then established the Hawaii Promise program that provides free college for students with any financial need, as well as supporting STEM education in our public schools and more. Can you address some of these critical issues that we're facing in education?
Sure. And I guess it's important to note that first and foremost, we will be focusing on COVID and safety this next session, as that's definitely going to be front of mind. But it is also important to look at some of these other issues. And as you just articulated, we have been working on making minimally disruptive changes to our DOE system. And I just want to be very clear when I say that we need to make adjustments to our system. This is most certainly the case for most states across the country. We have a systems problem. We have excellent teachers in Maui and across the state of Hawaii. Most of our teachers do right by our children. But our system is not set up to properly support those teachers, and therefore those teachers are not able many times, to properly support our students. And so we need to get to a place to where all of our kids are what I define as internationally competitive. And so some of the proposals that we have been working on over the past couple of years includes expanding universal access to high-quality early learning opportunities. And last year also, we were recognized by the name escapes me, but we were recognized for our efforts in providing the most progressive piece of legislation that passed any state legislature on this issue of expanding these opportunities. We want to do so after a 10-year period of time, and that is of crucial importance because when you think about growth and cognitive development, those early years have a much profound positive impact for these kids' scholastic futures moving forward from first grade to the 12th grade. And so when you look at high-performing systems, some of the things that you also see is, as an example, that the standards and curriculum are what's defined as internationally rigorous. And what I mean by that is that a third grader, as an example, what are they learning across the world that is at a very high standard? Mm-hmm. Because here in Maui and across the state, we want to match that standard. Another thing that you see is that students are properly supported. And for the state of Hawaii, what that means is we need to actually spend more money at the classrooms. And where I would start is actually giving our teachers automatic pay increases. Now, that's easier said than done. There's a lot that would go into that. But when you look at high-performing systems, one of the things that you see is that they pay their teachers much, much higher than we do in Hawaii and across the United States of America.
Yeah, that's very true. I used to work in an arena where we looked at and developed educational grants, and so that's always been a consistent challenge here, and it's a challenge in recruiting teachers and bringing our children back home who've gone into that realm on the mainland as well, where it's a challenge across the nation, but here in Hawaii it also seems to be a particular challenge. So, I'm excited to hear that, and I love that you're looking at this from an international point of view, because, we hear of children, for example, in Japan, who at a very early age are learning to play musical instruments. And, you hear stories. I remember a story from the National Science Foundation where they talked about how Albert Einstein and the bright minds of his day got together and talked about the importance of music and how it transformed their life. And learning music, they thought, made them more brilliant in the areas of science and math, for example. So as you're looking at STEM and as you're looking at all of these correlations between pre-K education and then improving STEM, and then making us more competitive internationally, what are some of the unique things that you are finding or feel really need to be infused into our educational system that help us get to being on par with the leading international standards?
Sure. So one of the things that you see in high-performing systems, as an example, is that kids enter into kindergarten ready to learn. Now, that can mean many things for many different places, but what it means mostly across the United States and the world is that they offer their 3- and 4-year-olds minimally very high-quality pre-kindergarten or preschool opportunities. And so, again, that's something that we are actively working on in the state of Hawaii. And I should mention that thus far, as we build out our pre-kindergarten program, we actually have one of the highest quality pre-K programs in the country, and that's according to NEAR, which is the National Institute for Education and Early Research, which is the authority on these types of things. And so that's something that we can be proud of, but we want to also offer our families options like high-quality pre-kindergarten charter schools or Hawaiian immersion or preschool. Mm-hmm. And so, again, that's something that we're actively working on. Another thing that you see, as I just mentioned, is that the standards and curriculum are, in fact, internationally benchmarked. And so in Hawaii, we are not doing bad in that regard. We do, in my mind, need to firm up those standards, followed up by the curriculum, but we are most certainly on the right path. And, again, support with the expectation that all students can learn. And to your most previous point, we need to offer our kids multiple types of educational opportunities and learning pathways, including hands-on or applied learning applications, because you need to meet kids where they're at, and there might be a child that excels in calculus, but another child that excels in auto mechanics. Right. And the truth is that we need both, and there shouldn't be a negative stigmatism towards one or the other. In high-performing systems, that's what you see. There is a portfolio of offering to educational pathways. We need to do the same. By the way, Pamela, here in Maui, our kids thrive. They excel at things like robotics and cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. And according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, these types of jobs, even after 2 years of accreditation, which is different, it's less than associate's degree. Okay, so with 2 years of accreditation, their average salaries are around $140,000 a year. So you can imagine what that would mean for our families if you have two individuals that are making $250,000. They'll be able to stay in Maui. They'll be able to provide for their families and themselves, and they'll be able to afford a home even in this crazy real estate market that we have, unfortunately, in Maui. And so these are some of the things that you see. You also see educators that have opportunities to do what's sometimes referred to as team teaching, which basically is the concept of educators that are at the same grade level. They work together to develop their lesson plans. They critique each other. They're having conversations on what is working in their classrooms, and they're sharing that information. That's coupled with teaching and mentoring for newer teachers defined as individuals that are new into the profession, 1 or 2 years. And they achieve this within the constructs of the normal school day, and they do it by actually decreasing the amount of time for instruction, which sounds counterintuitive, but it produces better results for the kids.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that. And actually, my daughter is a curriculum coach for the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City, Missouri. So I'm very familiar with that approach. And, it is a really excellent approach and also a clear mission. And believing in the excellence. One of the things you touched upon, and we've always said in our family, you touched upon the fact that people have different skill sets and their brains work differently. But we've always learned in our family that everybody has a kind of brilliance. Every individual has a kind of brilliance. We just all have maybe different kinds of brilliance and unique attributes and things that we really enjoy. But when we can apply those, it's so, then people thrive. When they find something that they excel at, they're good at, they love to do, then they really thrive. And I love that you're looking at that from the standpoint of how do we look across the spectrums and make sure that no child is left behind. We need all of those kinds of brilliance and talents. And then how do we engage a system to make sure that we're helping all of those students in a way that best works for them, which is very exciting. So, a big thing, Justin, on everybody's mind, and especially, we've gone back to school, we've had the classroom reopenings, and we're watching the case counts go up. Tell us about your thoughts on that, and how are we doing in the schools right now with the COVID cases going up, and are you feeling like we can continue on this path, or are there any concerns coming up?
The short answer is I have many concerns. As you can imagine, this year, because of COVID, there are some quite unique challenges as it relates to the Department of Education and ultimately school reopening. We are keeping an eye, we define as the House of Representatives and the Committee on Education is keeping an eye on many developments because ultimately what is very important is that we are mindful of mitigating the risks associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly because we know that this new D variant, this Delta variant, is much, much more transmissible than any of its predecessors. And so there are a lot of concerns that are happening within our schools, our public schools, unfortunately. As an example, our campuses have physical limitations. And what I mean by that is that the footprint or the square footage of some of the classrooms in Maui and across the state, they are simply not of sufficient size to accommodate the recommended 6 feet of separation recommended by the Center for Disease Control. And so that's something that, we're keeping an eye on. The guidance that came out of the United States Department of Education was do the best that you can to maintain that social distancing. But it is a genuine concern that we have. Similarly, particularly as it relates to elementary schools, they oftentimes have these double desks, which are desks that are joined together. That's how they are built. That's how they come. Obviously, if you're in that circumstance, then you are not able to separate from the person that's next to you. You and I, Pamela, we are oftentimes in environments to where individuals are supposed to be wearing masks and they don't. This is also the case for our students. The teachers are doing the best as they can to make sure that they keep kids masked up all the time and that they're wearing them properly. But that's also leading to a lot of concerns. And, of course, there's vaccinations. On August the 5th, the governor issued a directive through a proclamation stating that all state employees, they must be vaccinated or submit to weekly COVID tests. And we know that, about 80% of our teacher population is vaccinated. As of a couple of months ago, that number is probably higher now. The national average is upwards to 90%. And so we have some ways to go. That still leaves, for whatever reason, they choose to not be vaccinated. That is their right. They can do that. That's still 10 to 15% of the population, the teacher population, that is not vaccinated. Of course, there are other personnel that directly interface with kids. And so my serious concern, and something that we are actively looking into, is the fact that with this new variant, it's transmissible at a higher rate, and you are contagious earlier than, again, some of the earlier mutations. And so the most recent research is suggesting that you're transmissible after about 3 days, peaking after 3.71 days. And so if that is the case, then really we need to be looking at, for those individuals that don't have the vaccination, testing twice a week, minimally, at least twice a week. And that's also particular to our elementary school population, because they do not yet have the option of receiving a vaccination. And so, again, it goes back to making sure that we are mitigating risk associated with the pandemic. And, I'm just going to quickly touch on the business of education, which is learning. And unfortunately, we know that distance learning is not the optimal learning environment for most of our kids. And the research is showing us that there has been, at times, a year of learning loss, sometimes more, that needs to be made up over time. So within the construct of the normal school day, there are pedagogical practices in which you can do that. But again, that takes several years. I'm concerned about those individuals that are in high school that do not have that many years left. Inversely so, we're seeing a disturbing development because there has been a precipitous drop in kindergarten going rates by about 14%. And as far as we can tell, these kids are not going to private school. They're not homeschooling. They're just not schooling. And so obviously that's going to have a tremendous impact on their learning over time, because those years are so crucial for social, cognitive, and emotional development. And so these are things that we are keeping a close eye on. If we have more time, I would talk about sports, but that is also on the front of many people's minds.
Well, let's maybe talk about sports very quickly, and then talk a little bit about your legislative priorities for the coming year. We've got about 3 minutes that we can talk about those two things.
Sure. So with sports, the Department of Education has postponed sports until September, late September, which is next month. And that's a very emotional issue for families, because on one side, the argument is that everyone knows the risk associated with COVID, and from their perspective, they are the mindset of thinking that let individuals that want to play, knowing that risk, let them participate in fall sports. On the inverse side, of course, families concur with the department's decision to postpone sports until the end of next month. And from their viewpoint, is an argument of making sure that you're protecting the entire community, because if you have sports now, that means that the virus is going to transmit at a greater rate, which ultimately is going to spill out to the broader community. And so those are two very passionate sides of the argument as it relates to sports.
Yeah, it's really we're getting up against some really tough issues, and the other thing that's happening as the system's getting overwhelmed is, then we're running into cases where there's certain clusters in our community that, when we're looking at trying to do testing and continue vaccinations for larger groups, smaller pockets are getting left behind if they need testing, because we're starting to run out of tests. There's different issues that are coming up with more businesses testing, government testing. We're hearing challenges there, and so I heard Mayor Blangiardi, I think it was on the news this morning, Mayor Blangiardi has reduced outdoor group sizes now to 10 or no more than 25. I think, is that correct?
Absolutely. And, there are logistical nightmares. There's no sugarcoating here, but there are some logistical challenges with the test, and we know we're going to have to ramp up testing capacity again. So that's one of the issues that we are actually looking at as it relates to DOE schools.
Yeah. And again, for the, I know it's hard and we all have, well, not everybody, but many of us have had children in sports and know what sports contributes to their lives. And so it's a really tough call. And I know it's very hard to make these decisions. Speaking of those decisions, let's talk for a moment about legislative session. Any key priorities that you want to focus on this coming session?
Sure. We're going to continue to work to make adjustments. There are potentially some exciting opportunities that are transpiring, freshly formed partnerships between federal government and state government as it relates to education. That's typically not the case, but as an example, in President Biden's American Families Plan, they want to offer federal funding for high-quality pre-kindergarten. And so, again, because Hawaii is statutorily articulated our vision as it relates to providing access to those opportunities, we are very well positioned. And by the way, the entity that recognized us for our work on that last year with the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. I couldn't pull it up from my memory banks earlier, but that's the organization. And so, that's something that is going to be very fruitful for us, we think. And so right now we thought that it would take us about 10 years to get to where we needed to be to provide access universally. But if that bill is passed and that provision is maintained to a certain capacity, then we will be able to get to our goal much, much quicker. There are other potential offerings in federal legislation if it survives the reconciliation process to where we can also provide improved learning outcomes for our public schools. And so very exciting times. I'm not going to get into the nuances of what we're planning on doing, but it's depending upon, again, what comes out of Congress. But we are hopeful that there are going to be some robust and new partnerships that will benefit all of our kids.
That is awesome news. Well, Justin, thank you so much. We've loved having you on the show. You represent us well at our state legislature. I know you've been a staunch champion for education, and we deeply appreciate all of your efforts. And we'd love to have you back on the show again soon.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you for the opportunity. God bless.
Our pleasure. God bless you, too. Have a wonderful day. And we're going to take a brief break to hear from our sponsor, Mokulele Airlines.
Mokulele Airlines operates the largest commuter airline hub in the country, right here in Kahului. Fly Mokulele from Kahului to Molokai, Lanai, Hana, Waimea, Kona, and now Hilo. Mokulele also operates the only flights between Kapalua and Honolulu. There is never a middle seat on Mokulele, and every seat has a window and aisle. Visit mokuleleairlines.com and take your next flight from the newly renovated Mokulele Terminal.
We are now back. This is Business Matters, brought to you by the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and we get to welcome our District Director of the U.S. Small Business Administration, also known as the SBA, Hawaii Pacific Islands District Director, Thornton Mark Spain, but he goes by Mark. Mark's extensive experience includes over 50 years of banking, financial services, and consulting work specifically engaged in the formation of new businesses. Mark joined the SBA in 2012 and has served as the Deputy District Director before being appointed as the District Director in 2021. And he came in at the perfect time, and we got to see each other last week. Good morning, Mark, and welcome to the show.
Hey, mahalo, Pam. Good to hear your voice as well. Enjoyed the time we were together last week.
It was a lot of fun, and we're so excited that you are really making an effort to connect not just with Maui, but all of the islands in Hawaii, and really get out and meet with the small businesses that you represent. So it's wonderful to have had you here.
Oh, Thank you, Pam. Again, it just was a pleasure. Nothing was more important than that beautiful experience I had in the fields at Maui Pine, the Maui Pineapple Plantation, and having it cut right from the crop. It was a delight, to say the least. It was a great return to Maui.
Oh, well, we're so glad that you had a good time, and it was delicious. I mean, there's nothing like getting pineapple cut out in the field and served to you. It was really awesome. So we want to thank Rudy for that. He's amazing. So let's talk about, business needs and the needs that are your top priority issues for the SBA that you're working on with businesses to help them make it through these times.
I think you raise a good point. I think the most important thing that we see today is access to capital. We just heard, of course, in your prior guest about what's shifting in terms of what restrictions are being done in terms of looking forward into the fall months of the year. And I think our biggest need that we're hearing expressed is access to capital and, frankly, the ability to scale.
Yes.
So we are going to be working on programs in fiscal year 22, starting October 1st, with solutions that can be really brought to the business owner in maybe a number of new ways. But we have never really left the importance of access to capital, obviously contracting opportunities for those that work within the federal and state government workspace, and then, of course, counseling. And that's the reason, really, why my trip to Maui was so important, was to reestablish the SBA's presence, to work with colleagues such as Wayne Wong at the Small Business Development Center in Kihei, and to really, once again, show the SBA's very strong interest under my leadership with a great team that, of course, you had a chance to meet one of the team members, Valerie Komoda. So we really look forward to providing greater emphasis on access to capital and other nuances I know you're going to ask me about shortly.
We did have a great time, and I love meeting Valerie. She is a treasure. Valerie works with Mark and does marketing and outreach for the SBA. And, the SBA has long been known for helping businesses with access to capital and has a breadth of programs that, even pre-COVID were very extensive. They're widely known for doing these different programs. And so, since you mentioned the trip too, I just want to ask, what were some of the key things that you learned on your recent trip here that you might want to share with our listening audience? Not just with our tour, but, with your whole, I'm sorry, not just with the tour that we did, but, with your whole experience working with Wayne and others, because you were here for 2 full days. What were some of the key takeaways that you had from Maui, and were there any that were unique and not seen maybe statewide?
I think it's really unique in one respect, and that is Maui and its agricultural diversity, number one. I think the second thing was obviously the uniqueness and the entrepreneurial spirit that I experienced in the various businesses, whether it be, Maui Closet or whether it would be working with the team at Maui Jewels. It was really impressive also to work with the group that Made to Hope, which is the faith-based organization that we worked with in Wailuku. The key is the spirit of Maui and the personal touch that comes when we interact personally. Zoom is okay, but it doesn't take the place of what we do in reaching out. And also the importance of working with my congressional delegation here following my trip back from Maui, the importance of having adequate staff to serve the entire district. And Maui has not had a real strong presence from the SBA prior to the pandemic, and we're going to reverse that. The sense is very important. We need to be up close and personal with every business owner on the neighbor islands. And Oahu has been focused on for the last 2 or 3 years, of course, because of the pandemic. But as MacArthur said when he returned to the Philippines in World War II, I have returned. And I'm going to say that very clearly. I have returned, and the leadership, along with my colleagues in the Western Pacific, Ken Lujan, Maui is a very important part, particularly what I learned about Mahi Pono and what they're doing there, Pam. It was very, very rewarding to see the diversity. And I think the final impression that I had was the importance of technology. And I'm talking about, for example, in Maui Jewels, their emphasis on robotics so they can become more effective and efficient in serving their customers that are not only on Maui, primarily Maui, but also in their ability to e-commerce their business. I was really impressed with the team that we met there, Pam.
Yeah, there are amazing things going on, and if you're not familiar with Maui Fruit Jewels, they are a company that started with these amazing little jelly candies, and then they moved to a fruit paste, and then we got to see new pouches of puree that they're making, and they've launched new cookies. A very prolific company using every angle of the fruit that they take in and they buy from local farmers and come up with different iterations to, virtually use every bit as much as they can to eliminate all the waste. So, they recognize the fruit's a precious commodity. And so they're rocking and rolling, they're expanding, and they're doing new things. And it was exciting to see. And again, to hear them talking about robotics was great to hear. And we know that's coming. And so that's going to be a key thing that, we're working on as well, to educate people about some of these new technologies that are occurring, and maybe not as much on Maui right now, but definitely they have a role in our future. Well, and so tell us a little bit about your experience at Mahi Pono. Did you get to see those new chef's gardens?
Yes, we did. And I think the thing that I was impressed about particularly is the caring for the land.
Yes.
And that was one thing, of course, knowing the prior history, of course, of the land that was once the sugar plantation on Maui. It was just great to be reacquainted. Having first come to Maui back in the late 60s as a young man with family, I must tell you that there's more to come. We're coming back, Pam. We have to come back in October. I plan to make a team visit to Maui at least every 60 days throughout the balance of the year, and also throughout fiscal year 22 that ends in September of 22. We are going to make sure that the neighbor islands have a full supportive presence, and the ag particularly is of interest to me, and you and I spoke of that on a couple of occasions.
Yes.
How the ag industry, if we're going to be sustainable, we have to be intelligent about how we develop our sustainability.
Absolutely. And I know you're uniting partners across the state and new ag solutions, which is really exciting. And the thing is, as you point out, to have you here, and I just want to let all of our listening audience know, there's a way that we can help Mark and his team come to Maui more, because, when you look at large systems like the federal government, they kind of compare state to state. But we, as we know here in Hawaii, we are an island state, and we are separated by water. So it always helps to give a little nudge with the SBA and support Mark and his team coming out to Maui and the islands in Maui County and across the state to let people know they need, that takes added budget and added staff to support that kind of travel and interaction. So anything you can do to reach out to the SBA and encourage them to work with Mark and the district team to be more present on our neighbor islands, because when they come out, it's amazing as we connect Mark and Valerie, and they're meeting with different companies, and all of a sudden, the entrepreneurial spirit elevates to a really high level, and we start brainstorming on these meetings, and then solutions start coming forward. And just in the matter of an hour, each meeting was coming up with new ideas and helping to look at ways to elevate these companies, reduce their costs, get them into new programs, streamline their activity. So it was fascinating, the amount of level of not only interest in the SBA programs and the connection with Mark and Valerie, because they were here on the ground and people could see and meet them and know them, but also the resources that Mark and Valerie were able to bring to bear and quickly identify new solutions. And that's something the SBA has already been doing, and they've been doing for decades, but that in-person interaction, as you said, Mark, is essential. It's just essential, and we can help. We can let the SBA know this is the kind of interaction we want, because we have a lot of diversity that we need to do. As we all saw from COVID, we're very reliant on the visitor industry. We love and support the visitor industry. We want managed tourism, but we also want to diversify, so we have other avenues. And the SBA is our champion and our partner in that. So, Mark, tell us about some of the new things that SBA's offering and got on the table, and maybe some of the federal funding coming down the pike.
Great question. In fact, in meeting with the team that we've just been discussing at Maui Food Jewels, it caused me to make a call to headquarters to work with a very capable Brittany Sittler, who works with the Office of Innovation and Investment, and I'm going to be working specifically on what we call a small business investment and research grant program that has not been maybe heavily used in Hawai'i, but we are going to bring that relationship. I'm going to be going to Chicago on the 9th of September with that specific mission in mind to meet Brittany and another event that we're coordinating together. And that is something that we want to bring, and it's focused on technology, of course, innovative technology. And what I saw in the case of both visits that we did on Wednesday and Thursday, we have opportunities to bring that SBIR, I call it SIBR, but it's a very, very strong grant program that has probably been mostly done at the state level, where we work with DBED and Mark Ritchie and his team. But this is something I feel, given the technology focus, we can bring into Maui because of what I saw in the 2 days I visited there. Secondly, there is another program. It's called Community Navigator, where, as you know, Pam, in our conversation, we have 4 primary resource partners that give us the ability to reach into the field, and that is, of course, SCORE. It's largely, there's a Maui chapter as well as an Oahu chapter. And then we have the Women's Business Center at the Pansy Mink Center, obviously with the YWCA and in Oahu. Then we have the SBDC, of course, which is present on every island. And then we have the Veteran Business Outreach Center, which is located with UH, and also they serve the veteran community. But what we're talking about with Community Navigator is a much more extensive penetration into the community with nonprofit organizations, a hub-and-spoke model that you'll be hearing about as we go into the month of September. So please take note, Community Navigator, you're able to Google it, obviously, to get a little bit more detail than I can provide here. But we are very excited about the fact that in 2022, with the efforts of Pam, in your case, I've also worked with an inquiry from Chief of Staff Alan Yamamoto concerning the staffing and the service levels. So I will want to talk with you offline based upon information he provided me after I returned from Maui. He, too, was genuinely excited about once again seeing us return to the neighbor islands for the first time in any form or fashion since 2018. So I'm just letting you know that we have some work to do, and I can give you more information, later in the day as your day permits.
I would love to connect with you later in the day, and that would be awesome. We are excited about this working relationship with you, and I know all of Maui is excited to be partnering with you. And as you continue to come back and the outreach builds, it really is a tremendous way, especially during these times when we have to look at doing things different. COVID's changing the models. People are starting to get worried about having to pull back again. So looking at the assistance programs that the SBA offers, but also the innovation and the connections. And, we often for years saw HTDC as a big player as well in the SBIR program and in the high tech. So I think it's great that you're saying, working with Mark Ritchie and DBED, a lot of the small businesses that aren't in the tech realm maybe are not as familiar with that SBIR program. So I love that you're helping to build that bridge and bring that back and look at new ways to leverage that program and those funds.
Absolutely. And we do it with joy. And I think, as you know, I'm a retired Marine, and I have a strong hoorah presence, if you will. And it's through enthusiasm that you have brought to my leadership as well. The collaboration is probably the most important feature of what we look forward to doing in fiscal year 22. It's not that we have all the knowledge. We don't. If we don't go to the field and get input that can be done on an in-person basis, we miss part of the dynamic. And I think that's why in the next time we come, I'm looking forward, based upon ability to do so, roundtables. Actually have discussion activities that aren't just one-way talking, but us listening to the community that you so well know, and we look forward to that opportunity. Thank you much, Pam, for the opportunity to share with you today.
Oh, we're so grateful to have you on. I know how busy you are. I am available later this afternoon, so I'll ask Amber to reach out so we can connect further. And thank you to Valerie as well and your whole team. I know Mary didn't get to come, but, everybody at the SBA, I just want to say for our listening audience, if you're not familiar with the SBA and the Hawaii District Office that Mark is leading, which is also the Pacific Regional Office, reach out and contact the SBA. Learn what they can do for your business. Contact the Maui Chamber of Commerce. We're here to help you make connections as well. And, let's, really start some key dialogue right now. What is your business facing and how can we help? There are resources available for you. As Mark mentioned, there's many partners that they're working with. The SCORE, the SBDC, they've got the Women's Business Center, the Veterans Business Center and Outreach. So, wherever you're at in your business, if there's things that you're facing, if you have dreams that you're trying to achieve and you're trying to figure out how to make it work, if it's capital or it's equipment, make sure that you're reaching out to us and let's keep those connections going. We have loved, as always, having you on the show and getting to connect with you. I hope you have a beautiful Maui day. How about giving us a big hurrah?
Hoorah!
Because nobody does it like you. And God bless you, Mark, and I look forward to connecting with you really soon.
Great. God bless you, and Semper Fi to those that listen.
Thank you so much. Aloha and Semper Fi. Now we've got Sherri Dodson, and I want to welcome Sherri. She is the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity Maui. We might have just lost her, but I'll continue to introduce Sherri, and I'm sure she'll call right back in. Sherri was the first executive director hired and has helped guide the organization to completing over 100 homes in 16 years. She graduated from the University of Hawaii with a BA in political science and an emphasis in Hawaiian studies. She then continued her education at Western State Law School and graduated with a JD in 1986. Is Sherri on? Awesome. Aloha and good morning, Sherri. Sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. It's great to have you on the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You bet. So tell us about the projects that you folks are currently working on with Habitat for Humanity.
Well, we're busy as usual. We just finished up our 10-house subdivision in Lahaina, and we are currently, we've always partnered with DHHO, but we're back working with DHHO up in the Waiahuli Kula area to build some homes up there. We got about 5 homes in the queue.
Great.
And we continue, probably our biggest program right now is our critical repair program. We're working with the County of Maui Office of Aging to help kupuna make their homes safe so they can age in place. Anything from ramps to handrails to full bathroom renovations. So that keeps us really busy.
I can only imagine because I haven't looked at the statistics lately, but maybe you have information on that. But the last time I looked at the statistics, I mean, we had a growing number of people that were aging. And again, I know different programs are working on housing for the aging, but the longer they can stay in their homes, that's tremendous. So that's really great work. Are we?
Yeah,
do you know the percentage?
It benefits the. Excuse me?
Do you know the percentage of our population now that would qualify for being in the aging?
I don't know. I think I'm there, though. I don't know what the percentage is.
I just remember it was growing. We had it seemed to be that we had a greater percentage of our population that qualified in the aging category. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. It's such a good program because keeping a kupuna in their house, it helps the kupuna because they're familiar with their house. They, have lived there typically for many years. And, of course, it also helps, the children of kupuna so that they know that their family members are safe and secure in their homes. And, we're not putting them in an institution or in, assisted living or anything like that. So it benefits so many people. And it does spruce up the house in the neighborhood, so it's also helping our community. So we love that program, and of course, we love working with kapunas. They make wonderful bread and cookies, and the construction team benefit greatly.
That's so awesome. Well, the kapuna just come with that aloha spirit, and, I'm sure they are so thrilled to have the help, but, because they're not able to keep up their house the same way. And so it's nice that you are helping and refurbishing and keeping everything fresh and safe for them. And I love that, again, also, sometimes we forget some of the nuances, but like the importance of maintaining the houses and the look for the community as well in the neighborhood. That's really important too. So, what a great win-win all the way around. And and when it comes to housing, you have been a tremendous leader as we've been looking at affordable housing and rentals and what our community needs to do. We're still woefully behind. And what ideas and comments, I know you've been looking at the Hawaii Community Asset Plans, and what do you think are some of the key components to address our housing crisis in the near term? What are some of the things that we can just really jump in and make a measurable difference on?
Well, I think there's some basic concepts that everybody just needs to accept, and that is, one of them is compromise. There's not going to be the perfect housing project in the perfect area with the perfect pricing. If we're waiting for that, we're going to be waiting for a long, long time. So
right.
There has to be some compromises. It may be the perfect project with the perfect prices, but it's in a neighborhood where people, don't want affordable housing, what we call attainable housing.
Right.
Or, it may be housing that a developer is doing that's a little bit higher level, not the 80% and below or the 100% and below, but, people need that income group served as well. So I think we just kind of need to compromise. I hear no more than I hear yes, even
right.
with Habitat. And if we're really committed to solving the issue of attainable housing on Maui, we need a variety of different solutions, and that means, Habitat for Humanity, Nahali o Maui, but we also need developers. And I know, many times we say developers and everybody gets all up in arms. Oh, the developers, the greedy contractors, they're just making money. Sure, they're making money. Everybody wants to make money. Even I want, as a nonprofit, want to make money. That's
we have to make money.
Our organization.
Right.
Yeah, it shouldn't be such a negative connotation. So, kind of looking at things a little differently. And if you're really committed to, achieving the numbers that we need, there has to be compromise, and we have to do a variety of different housing methods.
I agree. And one of the things that I'm really concerned about, and I'm sure you are as well, when we see projects come forward, and sometimes we see that, they're just rejected for one reason or another. Like you said, there is no compromise. It's just the project's rejected. Or we see projects that could move forward, and as they go through the process, additional conditions are heaped on the project, and then later they no longer pencil out, so then they don't happen. The real concern I see is that every time we don't move forward, the cost of housing continues to rise. And now, as we're seeing in materials, the cost of lumber is going up. So now we don't just have that normal rise just from sort of inflationary type of things, but now we're seeing delays in getting housing done is going to mean the housing is going to be exponentially more expensive to build the longer we keep delaying.
Yes, I agree completely. And again, if we all would just sit down and compromise instead of, and sometimes I think it is a very small vocal group that say no all the time. We need everybody to raise their voices. And, the tough part is that, so many people are just, they work their jobs, they take care of their kids, they do their sports activity with their kids. They don't have time to come out and, testify or speak up about, attainable housing.
Right.
And so the small vocal minority is very loud. And so we think that is the entire community. Yet in my neighborhood, I talk to everybody in the neighborhood who, again, are just working and doing their thing. And, oh yeah, we need more affordable. That project should have gone through. But getting them to speak up is tough.
Yeah. It really is, and the other situation that I see is the current process doesn't allow for dialogue. Just even coming and giving your 3 minutes of testimony, it's very one-directional. You're there and you're sharing your thoughts, and of course, council members can ask questions on your very specific testimony, but we don't get into engaging dialogue like you would with a task force or something like that, where you unite everybody together and you bring all the major players together to go back and forth on the ideas. It's hard to, I think, come to compromise with the way things are being run right now. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I do have a little bit of reservation about task force because in the last 20 years, I've been on more than 20.
Yes.
A task force is a great idea if the council and the administration and the people that are approving permits and everybody is at the table.
Right.
So if we could, several years ago we had a project and it was stalled, and the administration said, okay, every single one of the departments is coming to a meeting, send a representative that is a decision maker. And we all got in a room, and I said, well, this is the issue. Your department's saying this, and your department's saying that. What do we do? And they looked at each other. Oh, you're saying that? Oh, you're saying this? And everything got resolved in that meeting. And it wasn't that long of a meeting. It was like an hour and a half.
Right.
So my idea of a task force is getting all the players into the room that are decision makers, including the council, administration, all the way down to who's looking at your permit. And then let's talk about solutions.
I agree. Yeah, and that's my view too. But you're right. I'm glad you clarified that because, again, we don't have time to just keep talking and looking at pie in the sky things. We got to get to what's real, what the holdups are, and what are the breakthroughs. Because we can solve these challenges, and then we need to pick priority projects to kind of get going. What's ready to move, and how can we make that work? Sherri, we've got about a minute to go, but before we need to close. But how can the public help?
I think, again, using your voice, standing up for projects. For Habitat personally, of course, we use volunteer labor. That's how we build very inexpensive homes. And supporting those nonprofits that are building, like Nahalio Maui, like Habitat for Humanity in Lokahi Pacific, and supporting projects when they come up in your area.
Awesome.
This NIMBY stuff is if we really want everybody to have a house, it's going to be in somebody's backyard.
That's right.
So accepting that.
I'm gonna have to jump in there because we've got to run. I'm so sorry the music's rolling, but thank you so much, Sherri, for joining us and for those great ideas. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. It goes quick. Thanks to our sponsor, Mokulele Airlines. I'm Pamela Tumpot, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, wishing you blessings and best wishes for a beautiful Maui day. Aloha.